One of the most valuable music production lessons I ever received in my entire life was from Chopin. What it says.
Oh no! Oh, I haven't practiced this in so long.
As a slightly terrified college freshman, I found myself playing Chopin's B-flat minor scherzo for a masterclass with Dr. Louis Nagel. A masterclass is basically just a public lesson where a guest artist comes in and teaches you in front of a bunch of other people. In that piece, there's a moment where Chopin omits the very first note of the opening motive, seemingly the most important thematic idea in the entire piece.
That's the first time. Second time.
And in my excitement to get to the more virtuosic passages that followed, I was a 17-year-old kid after all, I kind of blew through that rest. I don't think I cleared out the pedal properly or didn't give it its full duration, just utterly disrespected it entirely. Well, Dr. Nagel very kindly and politely stopped me, set the music down on the stand, and pointed to that exact measure and said, "What's the first thing that we play in this measure?" And then I think he said something like, "I'll give you a hint, this is a trick question." And thank goodness he gave me that hint, because that allowed me to understand what he was getting at, and I said, "the rest." Probably also because my teacher had already told me something similar.
In fact, on this very first page, there are several moments where he incorporates rest or silence to make the next climactic moment even more impactful.
I feel like music, whether it be in the production world or in the more classical composition world, is largely about contrast, and well-placed contrast at that. And one of the most contrasting things that you can have before a big climactic moment is nothing. From that point forward, I started to literally inhale with rest, to play the rest as they happen. And that allowed me to actually put the silence in my body with some sort of bodily gesture. And it came in really handy when I started playing with ensemble groups and chamber groups, because there was no conductor. We had to communicate with each other, and breathing with the rest was a really, really effective way to do that and give each other physical cues. And it's also something that has definitely stuck with me as I've entered the world of music production in the last decade or so. If you want to emphasize something, put a little space before it, and it really puts a spotlight on the thing you actually want to emphasize. But how in the world do you apply this to your actual music productions? I was recently working on a track for a tutorial video, and there was this moment where I felt that the build into the climax just wasn't powerful or impactful enough. I experimented with a number of things and then discovered that what it needed most was a moment of absolutely nothing, and this would effectively act like an inhale before the exhale that was the climax. I think I may know what could help with that. Let me take that out and see what happens. That's what it was. Because there wasn't enough contrast in going from that sort of dropout section to where everything comes back in, because that's one of the highest elements. Also, it's constantly moving. By keeping those octaves going constantly, there was no place for the listener to say, to inhale. Do you see what I just did? It was like, I need that inhale moment before everything happens, right? So listen to that again, because I think that totally fixed my problem. Because I use a decent amount of hardware and render to audio fairly early in the process, sometimes even using tape loops as part of the sound design, I like to either perform a section in one solid take or set up a sequence to run while I tweak stuff. This means I usually end up with a solid chunk of audio that lasts the entire duration of the track. And after I have that, I like to use a technique I've started to call subtractive arrangement, which is essentially what I've demonstrated here. Just like in subtractive synthesis, where we start with a very harmonically rich waveform and then shave off the frequencies that we don't want, In subtractive arrangement, I'm starting with an element that might be a bit too persistent, a bit too relentless, and carve out space where it's needed. And if I can create a little gap where something is not happening, it makes it much more impactful when it actually comes back. We don't have the ear fatigue of having listened to that for the entire 3 or 4 minutes or however long our piece is. Works really well in ambient drone if you find that you're getting really bored with what you have. Maybe try removing some things, pulling some elements out, rather than just trying to shove more stuff in there. I think a pretty good example of the way that I like to use this is from my super top secret synth rock vocal project, Lost Art of Surrender, which no one knows about because I haven't had time to work on it in like 2 years. This whole thing started as a weird distorted modular synth jam where the same 3 chords basically just repeat over and over. But when I just took everything down to digital 0 right before the climax, it really kind of shakes the earth when it comes back in. So to me, it worked as a moment of extreme contrast, and in this particular genre and style of music, it worked really well. I think I've talked a little bit about this concept with melodic writing, where if the same rhythmic motion is happening throughout the course of a melody, there's no place for the listener to sort of rest or catch their breath. And it's kind of the same concept we're dealing with here. If everything is always happening, it starts to feel like nothing really important is happening. So, if you're having trouble with a climax or something that you would like to emphasize, maybe instead of trying to make that thing bigger, back up just a little bit and figure out how you approach getting to that moment. And you might find that what it actually needs is absolutely nothing. To read more about some of these compositional and production techniques that have been most helpful to me over the years, you can download my free ebook, which looks a lot like this, and you can get as the first link in the description for nothing. It'll walk you through some examples of some of the stuff that I'm talking about. If you stuck around to the end, you're truly one of my favorite people of all time, and I will see you in the next one.